Okay, at this point, once you got it back together and you're good to go, what you need to do is put it back on the marker, back on the body. And again, I should mention this. These screws are a different length. This screw is longer than the screw in the back, and there's a reason for that. If you have the short screw in the front and the long screw in the back, what you'll find is the hammer will hit the long screw after you screwed it in. You see how it comes through that hole right there? If you have the long screw in there and you can only pump the gun about 1/8 of an inch, you know to switch the screws. Anyway, at this point, you basically line them up, put those in those keyholes, and slide that in, okay? You're also going to want to, at its most loose point, attach the AT arm, turn this upside down, everything's back in its place now, and you're simply just going to tighten that down. Go a little at a time back and front because those are recessed in a keyhole, so they don't want to just tighten one up and then tighten the other up. It just won't, it'll fight you a little bit. Tighten those down, and you're good to go. We're back together, everything's rocking and rolling. That's it for the grip frame. I'm going to take it back off and I'll show you how to take off the pump arm, and we'll get into the top tube here on the next video. Okay, we're back. What we're going to do in this video is take off the pump, the back block, the cocking rod here, and get into the top tube very briefly. And I'll show you guys some of this front stuff. This isn't difficult at all. This can be done on the field, especially once you've gotten this part off. And if you've taken the grip frame off, just solidly, nothing's going to fall out. Again, make sure that those pins stay in. I always put a little piece of tape over them just so that I know that they stay in as I'm setting them aside and working on them on the field. Last thing you want to do is drop those tiny little pins in the grass. You're never going to find them unless you have a huge magnet. First thing that needs to come off is this cocking rod. Okay, this cocking rod has a bumper. Double check it to make sure that bumper is not worn. And I buff these cocking rods. Just one of the things I do. Sand it back, buff it to a high polish using a buffing wheel, and then I know it's super smooth. Next thing I'm going to do is pop this pin out. You can do that one of two ways. I push from the back. You can also grab it from the front, either way. Pulling that pin out, setting it aside. Then that bolt comes out. Now, the bolt, a couple of things you need to check for on the bolt. One thing I'm going to check for is to make sure that this pin is retaining itself properly. You want to snap, okay? If it's not, you're going to want to replace the O-ring that's in here that holds that in. Super rare, you probably don't need to worry about it, but the last thing you want to do is that pin to come out. Wow, that flew. I don't even know where that went. You don't want that to come out and the bolt comes out on the field and you can't shoot for the rest of the day. The other thing you're going to want to do is check the bolt for wear. Usually if you're going to get any wear on this Delrin, it's going to be from dirt and grime that gets in here. As you're pumping it back and forth, it gets striations and gets messed up. If it does, get 1,000, 2,000 grit sandpaper, add a little water to it, and take those striations out. It's just going to make things smoother, okay? Put that like that. All right. The next thing we're going to do is take this pump handle off. Now, you can unscrew this all the way if you want to, but what I've found is you don't need to. 1/2 turn, give it a little bend, push this off of here, and set it aside. That's during normal teardown. Now, of course, in the spirit of this video, we're going to take the block all the way off. For whatever reason that's good for. Take that all the way off. You can clean those threads, clean that up, clean that piece up too, and put it back together. And then if you're really dirty, you can take off these 3 screws that are submerged in Delrin and take the pump plate off of there and separate it from the Delrin pump handle. Okay? This is really unnecessary unless, again, you're just a gooby little mess, because, look how clean that is. I'd run some Q-tips down these major holes, okay? Clean them out with your solution, and then just put it back together. Let it dry and put it back together. It's rare that you need to do anything different than, for the most part, just leaving that, leaving that together. Some people are looking at this video right now and even saying, dude, I've never taken that apart. And, you might not need to, especially if you don't get shot. And I never get shot. Not fairly, at least. I wipe the ones where I get shot. Those are unfair hits. Just a little tip from me. So tighten this down and put it back together. Set that aside. Now, what we're going to take apart next is, and I won't take both of them apart, but on the Series 6 J2L and Series 6.5, you've got a little screw, and it takes a 1/16, the second littlest. Take that apart, unscrew that, and that cover comes right off. Quite often with it will come the detent, and it leaves that behind. That is the ball detent where that goes in, okay? And this is where the screw hole goes in. This is a 3-part system. Ball detent, screw, tiny screw, and this cover. Almost looks like an eye cover, but of course there's no eyes on a pump, or there shouldn't be, or you're going straight to the underworld. Clean that up, clean this out with a Q-tip, and simply reassemble. .1/16 Allen key, not 050. Put that back together. Do the same for the other side, and you're good to go. Again, making sure that both detents are in good shape. If they're not, replace them with a spider or intimidator detent, and then you're going to be set there. The last thing we're going to take off here, which is again probably unnecessary, using a 3/16, not a 5/32, using a 3/16, is this front pump guide rod. That can come off. There's one static O-ring right there. Clean that area up and re-lube upon reassembly. And I always buff this. This one hasn't been buffed in a while, but I always buff this. Yours might not be fluted. It might be solid. It really doesn't matter. Chipley did this for a while. It was kind of a cool little thing. I wish they still did it, but they don't anymore. Drop costs. And polish this up, and you can put it right back together. Now, I do want to show you the difference in a Series 5 and some of the earlier Series 6s. Here's my Series 5. It has an ASA that is not part of the body like they did on the J2Ls, okay? So you might have a Series 6 that's solid here, or you might have a Series 6 that has 2 parts here, okay? On the Series 5, it's not only 2 parts here, but the guide rod doesn't go in the body, it goes in a separate piece. So instead of just taking out that one screw, you're going to take that out and the whole thing will slide out on the Series 5. Again, not that much of a difference, but you can see why I wanted to show it to you. Now, if you do have one of those 2-piece ASAs, what it does is it takes a 3/16 down here to undo it, and you can see that on the T2 video how I do that. But you're going to want to make sure that this guide rod is perfectly aligned when you reassemble it. Here's why. A little bit of hater sauce here. I'm running out of hands. A little bit of hater sauce here when I'm reassembling on this O-ring just to make sure it seals. Again, probably never had a problem with it, probably never would, but that's just what I do. Okay. Reassemble this. And what you're going to want to make sure when you put this back together is that everything is moving smoothly. I use to set my markers every now and again super anal, is a set of calipers to make sure that these pump guide rods are running parallel to each other. If they're not, I'm going to tweak them, usually it tweaks the bottom one, to make sure that they're running absolutely parallel and moving as smoothly as they can. What you want is just that stainless steel running on just this aluminum. The Delrin's been bored out. It doesn't run on the Delrin. It runs only on the aluminum, okay? So I want to put that on there, and I want it to be moving smoothly as possible. And as you can see, it moves super smooth. Some of you use a return spring. I'm not a big fan of the return spring, but if you did, drop it back in at that point. Screw this back down. I know that I'm not like that. I have to be one turn off to be right. Put the bolt back in. Make sure, this is an old school trick, but make sure you're putting the bolt back in with the hole down. What you don't want is the hole up, or you'll never get any air transfer coming out your bolt. Unless it's your friend's gun, then turn it upside down, reassemble, and it will take them a while and to figure out why their gun is shooting 15 feet per second. Only do that if they're playing on the other team, however. Just a little tip from TF. So in this video we've covered wiping paint and sabotaging your friend's markers. Put this back in. This can be a little tricky sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't want to go all the way in. If it does, that one went in 2 screws. Turn that out until it comes back out and try again. Make sure that that is going in all the way. So once that's back in correctly, that portion has been reassembled. So at this point, again, if you were fully reassembling, you'd put your 2 screws back on here and you put your grip frame back on. But that covers the top tube and its disassembly, and also takes the pump arm off. I'll take all that back off. And in the next video, we'll cover what goes on in the bottom tube, which is a little bit more intense, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. See you then.